The phone rang at exactly 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I knew my life was about to go to hell. Not because of some supernatural premonition or gut feeling, nothing that dramatic. I knew because my wife Leah was supposed to be at a corporate retreat in Boston and her boss was calling our house asking why she'd missed the evening presentation. Eli, this is Richard Caldwell from Nexus Tech. Is Leah feeling all right? She wasn't at tonight's strategic planning session, and we've got the big client presentation tomorrow morning. I sat there in my boxers holding the cordless phone, staring at the empty beer bottle on my nightstand. The television was still flickering with some late-night talk show, and I could hear Mrs. Bauer's dog barking next door. Everything felt normal except for the ice-cold realization spreading through my chest. "Oh," I said, keeping my voice steady. "She mentioned feeling under the weather earlier. Probably sleeping it off. You know how these things go, right? Well, tell her to call me first thing if she's feeling better. We really need her input on the Morrison account." "Will do, Richard. Thanks for checking in." I hung up and sat there for a long moment, processing what I just learned. My wife of 8 years, the woman who'd sworn to love and honor me, who'd cried at our wedding when she promised to always be honest with me, was lying. Not just a little white lie about spending too much on shoes or forgetting to pay a bill. A big, calculated, elaborate lie that involved fake conferences and missing work presentations. I walked to our bedroom and opened Wila's dresser drawer. Her passport was still there, along with her good jewelry and the emergency credit card we kept for real emergencies. So she wasn't planning to disappear forever. This was something else entirely. My phone buzzed with a text message from Laya. "Conference is going great. Learning so much. Might extend the stay another day or two. The networking opportunities are incredible. Love you." I stared at that message for a full minute, reading it 3 times. The exclamation points looked like tiny daggers. The casual mention of extending her stay after she'd already lied about where she was felt like a slap across the face. I texted back, "Sounds productive? Richard called looking for you. Told him you were sick." The response came back almost immediately. "Oh no, I forgot to tell him I was taking a personal day. Thanks for covering. You're the best." More lies. Smooth, effortless lies that rolled off her fingers like she'd been practicing them. I wondered how long this had been going on, how many other conferences and work trips had been complete fabrications. I got up and walked to the kitchen, suddenly wide awake despite the late hour. Our house was a modest 2-story colonial that we'd bought 5 years ago, back when we still talked about having kids and growing old together. The mortgage payment was manageable on my construction foreman salary, combined with her HR director income. We'd painted the kitchen yellow because Laya said it would make morning coffee feel more cheerful. Now the yellow walls just looked sickly under the fluorescent light. I opened my laptop on the kitchen table and logged into Facebook. Laya wasn't much of a social media person, but her friend Sloan posted everything she did online. If Laya was somewhere she wasn't supposed to be, Sloan would probably document it. It took me about 10 minutes of scrolling through Sloan's feed before I found what I was looking for. A photo posted 6 hours ago. Wila and Sloan at some beachfront bar, cocktails in hand, both of them laughing at something off camera. The location tag read Sunset Grill, Cape Cod. Cape Cod. Not Boston, not a corporate retreat, not anywhere she was supposed to be. I screenshotted the photo and sat back in my chair, feeling something cold and hard settling in my stomach. This wasn't just a girl's weekend that she'd lied about to avoid an argument. This was something bigger, more deliberate. The fake conference story, the lies to her boss, the careful text messages. This was planned deception. I scrolled through more of Sloan's photos from the past few days. There was Laya at a fancy restaurant, Laya shopping at some boutique, Laya on a boat with a group of people I didn't recognize. And in several of the photos, partially visible in the background or cropped at the edge of the frame, was a man I'd never seen before. He looked like the kind of guy Laya used to date before we met. Tall, well-dressed, probably drove an expensive car and talked about wine pairings. The complete opposite of a construction worker who came home with dirt under his fingernails and preferred beer to Chardonnay. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Laya. Going to bed early tonight. Big day tomorrow. Don't wait up, love you. I looked at the timestamp. It was nearly midnight here, which meant it was nearly midnight where she was too. But according to Sloane's most recent Instagram story posted 20 minutes ago, they were still at the bar. And Laya was very much awake, singing karaoke with Mr. Tall, Dark, and Expensive. That's when something inside me snapped. Not in a violent, explosive way, more like a cable that's been under tension for too long, finally giving way with a quiet, definitive break. The Eli who would have spent the next 3 days worrying and making excuses for her behavior was gone. In his place was someone harder, someone who was tired of being played for a fool. I texted back, "Sleep tight. We'll talk when you get home." Then I turned off my phone and went to the basement. Our basement was my sanctuary. Half workshop, half man cave with concrete walls that stayed cool even in summer and the lingering smell of sawdust and motor oil. I had a workbench along one wall, a few power tools, and an old refrigerator stocked with beer. It was the one part of the house that was entirely mine. I grabbed a beer and fired up my laptop again, settling into the worn leather recliner I'd rescued from a construction site demolition. If Laya wanted to play games, I needed to understand the rules. I started with the basics. Our joint checking account showed a withdrawal of $800 cash 3 days ago, the day before her supposed conference. Our credit card had charges from a gas station in Hartford, a restaurant in Providence, and a hotel in Hyannis. None of these places were anywhere near Boston. The hotel charge was particularly interesting. The Ocean View Resort, Hyannis. I looked it up online. Definitely not the kind of place you'd stay for a corporate retreat. More like the kind of place you'd take someone you wanted to impress. Ocean views, couple spa packages, romantic dinner options. I took a long pull of my beer and kept digging. Wyla's phone records were accessible through our family plan account. I'd never bothered checking them before. Why would I? But trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. The past month showed dozens of calls and texts to a number I didn't recognize. Long calls, late-night calls, calls made during her lunch breaks at work. I reverse-searched the number and got a name, Carter Hale. A quick Google search told me everything I needed to know about Carter Hale. He was a regional sales director for a software company, recently divorced, owned a condo in downtown Hartford, and a sailboat marode in Cape Cod. His LinkedIn profile showed him at various industry events, always impeccably dressed, always smiling, that confident smile of a man who'd never been told no. His Facebook page was a catalog of expensive restaurants, weekend trips, and photos of himself on that sailboat. In the past month, there were several photos that looked like they'd been taken in the same locations where Sloane had photographed Laya. The same restaurant, the same beach, the same bar. I finished my beer and opened another one. The timeline was becoming clear. Laya had met Carter somewhere, probably at one of those networking events she was always attending for work. They'd started talking, texting, meeting for lunch. The lunch meetings had turned into something more, and now she was spending a long weekend with him, lying to everyone about where she was and what she was doing. I thought about our last few months together, the way she'd started working late more often, the way she'd become protective of her phone, taking it with her to the bathroom and keeping it face down during dinner. The way she'd seemed distracted during conversations, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. The signs had been there. I'd just been too trusting or too stupid to see them. My phone vibrated with a text message. I'd forgotten I'd turned it back on. The message was from my best friend, Mick. "You up? Something weird happened at the Anchor tonight." The Rusty Anchor was our local bar, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and gossip traveled faster than wildfire. Mick worked there as a bouncer 3 nights a week, supplementing his disability checks from the Army. I texted back, "Yeah, I'm up. What happened? Your wife's friend Mandy was here with some guy talking loud about how Leia was finally living her best life and deserved better than being stuck in this small town. Thought you should know. Manned Leia's co-worker and self-appointed life coach. The kind of woman who thought every marriage was a prison and every husband was an obstacle to female empowerment. She'd never liked me and the feeling was mutual. Thanks for the heads up," I texted back. "I'll call you tomorrow." "You okay, man?" I stared at that question for a long time. Was I okay? My wife was cheating on me with some slick salesman lying to my face and apparently discussing our marriage with her friends like it was some kind of tragic situation she needed to escape from. Her friends were celebrating her betrayal in public, treating it like some kind of liberation. No, I wasn't okay, but I was going to be. "I'm fine," I texted back, "just tired." I spent the next hour creating a folder on my laptop and saving everything I'd found. Screenshots of Sloane's photos, printouts of the hotel charges, records of the phone calls, Carter's social media profiles. I labeled the folder insurance and password protected it. Then I went upstairs and did something I'd never done before in 8 years of marriage. I went through Leia's personal belongings. Her jewelry box yielded nothing interesting. Her dresser drawers were neat and organized, exactly as I'd expected, but her closet was different. Pushed way back behind her winter coats, I found a small overnight bag I'd never seen before. Inside were clothes I'd never seen her wear, lingerie that was definitely not purchased for my benefit, a dress that was more expensive and revealing than anything in her regular wardrobe, and a bottle of perfume that wasn't the scent she usually wore. At the bottom of the bag was a receipt from Victoria's Secret dated 2 weeks ago. $347 for items I'd never seen her wear at home. I sat on the bedroom floor holding that receipt, feeling something dark and cold spreading through my chest. This wasn't a sudden impulse or a moment of weakness. This was premeditated. She'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months, buying special clothes, creating elaborate cover stories, building a whole secret life that didn't include me. My phone buzzed with another text from Leia. "Good morning. Another beautiful day at the conference. Learned so much yesterday, can't wait to share everything with you when I get home." I looked at the timestamp. It was 2:17 a.m. Either she was sending texts in her sleep or she was lying in bed next to Carter sending me cheerful updates about her fake conference. I didn't text back. Instead, I went back to the basement and started planning. I didn't sleep much that night, but I was up and showered by 6 a.m., ready for another day of pretending everything was normal. I had a crew to supervise on a residential renovation project across town, and work had always been my refuge when life got complicated. But first, I needed coffee and information. Vivian's Pet Paradise opened at 7 a.m. sharp, and Viv was always there early setting up the fish tanks and checking on the birds. More importantly, Viv knew everything that happened in our town. She was like a one-woman intelligence network, collecting gossip from customers and neighbors with the dedication of a professional spy. The bell above the door chimed as I walked in, and Viv looked up from the parrot cage she was cleaning. She was in her 50s with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Eli Barnes, you're up early," she said, studying my face with the intensity of someone reading a book. "Coffee is fresh if you want some." Viv always kept a pot going for her regular customers. I poured myself a cup and leaned against the counter, trying to look casual. LLA's at a work conference, I said, testing the waters. Boston? Big corporate retreat thing. Viv's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. That's so. When did she leave? Tuesday morning. Supposed to be back today, but she might extend it. Viv went back to cleaning the cage, but I could tell she was thinking. Funny thing, I could have sworn I saw her car at the train station Monday night, but I guess I was mistaken. The train station, the last stop before Hartford, where Carter lived, where someone might leave their car if they were planning to travel with someone else. Probably someone with the same model, I said carefully. Probably. Viv finished with the cage and turned to face me fully. You know, Eli, I've been running this shop for 12 years. You get to know people, their patterns, their habits, and sometimes you notice when those patterns change. I waited. Your wife's been different lately, more secretive. Last month she came in here asking about boarding services for a dog. You folks don't have a dog. Maybe she was asking for a friend? Maybe. Except she was very specific about dates. Wanted to know about weekend boarding, multiple weekends, like she was planning ahead for something. I felt that cold sensation in my stomach again. Even the dog boarding inquiry had been part of her cover story preparation. She'd been building an entire false narrative complete with supporting details. I appreciate you looking out for us, I said. Viv nodded. That's what neighbors do. And Eli, if you ever need to talk or if there's anything I can do to help, you just let me know. I left the pet shop with more than just coffee. I had confirmation that other people had noticed Laya's changed behavior, and I had an ally who was clearly willing to share information. My phone rang as I was walking to my truck. Mick's name appeared on the screen. You got a minute to talk? He asked without preamble. Yeah, what's up? I did some asking around after last night about what Mandy was saying at the bar. Mick had been my best friend since high school, back when we played football together and thought we knew everything about life. The Army had changed him, made him quieter, more observant, less trusting of easy answers. But it had also made him fiercely loyal to the people he cared about. What did you find out? Mandy's been running her mouth for weeks, telling anyone who will listen that Laya's finally found someone who appreciates her and that you're holding her back from her potential. Real supportive friend, that one. Did she mention any names? Carter something? Rich guy with a boat. Apparently he's been taking Isla to all the fancy places she's always wanted to go. I closed my eyes and leaned against my truck. So it wasn't just local gossip. Laya's affair was becoming public knowledge, discussed openly by her friends like it was some kind of romantic adventure instead of a betrayal of 8 years of marriage. There's more, Mick continued. I talked to Danny at the gas station. He remembers Laya filling up Monday night, says she was with some guy in an expensive car. Guy paid for the gas. Acted real familiar with her. Thanks for checking into this. You don't sound surprised. I told him about the phone call from Laya's boss, the fake conference, the hotel charges, and everything else I discovered. Mick listened without interrupting, occasionally grunting or swearing under his breath. So, what's your plan? He asked when I finished. I don't have one yet, still processing all this. Well, when you figure it out, count me in. I never liked the way she looked down on you anyway. Always acting like she was too good for this town, too good for your job, too good for the life you built together. That was the thing about Mick. He saw things clearly without sentiment or wishful thinking. He'd probably noticed problems in my marriage that I'd been too close to see. I need to get to work, I said. But I'll call you later. Eli, don't do anything stupid, but don't let her make a fool of you either. I spent the morning trying to focus on work, directing my crew through the installation of new kitchen cabinets in a house that belonged to a young couple who still looked at each other like they were sharing a wonderful secret. It was hard to watch their easy affection. The way they touched hands when they passed each other, the way they consulted on every small decision. Laya and I used to be like that, or maybe I just thought we were. My phone buzzed with a text around noon. Conference is amazing. Learning so much about strategic partnerships. Wish you could see this place. It's beautiful. Love you. I stared at that message, imagining her typing it while Carter was in the shower, or while they were having lunch at some expensive restaurant, or while they were walking on the beach together. The casual cruelty of it, sending loving messages to her husband while she was with another man, was breathtaking. I texted back, "Sounds great. Can't wait to hear all about it." Then I called in sick for the afternoon and drove home to prepare for war. The thing about construction work is that it teaches you to plan ahead, to anticipate problems before they happen, and to always have the right tools for the job. As I sat in my basement that afternoon, I realized that ending a marriage required the same methodical approach as building a house. First, I needed more evidence. What I had was solid, but I wanted it to be overwhelming, undeniable, impossible to explain away with tears and apologies and promises to change. I started with technology. Laya and I shared a family plan for our cell phones, which meant I had access to detailed records of her calls and texts, but the content of those texts was locked behind her password. However, our home computer automatically backed up her phone data, and I'd set up that system myself 2 years ago when she'd lost all her photos in a phone crash. It took me about an hour to figure out how to access the backup files, but when I did, I hit the motherlode. Months of text messages between Laya and Carter. Starting innocent enough, work-related conversations, professional networking, but quickly escalating into something much more personal. Complaints about me, about our marriage, about how she felt quote-unquote trapped and quote-unquote undervalued. Carter's responses were perfectly calibrated to feed her dissatisfaction, positioning himself as the understanding alternative to her disappointing husband. The messages from the past few weeks were explicit, detailed, and left no doubt about the physical nature of their relationship. They had been planning this Cape Cod weekend for a month, down to which restaurants they'd visit and which activities they'd enjoy together. But the worst part wasn't the sexual content or even the elaborate planning. It was the casual contempt they both showed for me. Carter referring to me as the construction guy, like I was some kind of temporary inconvenience. Laya agreeing that she deserved better, and that she was finally ready to prioritize her own happiness. I printed everything and added it to my growing file. Next, I needed to understand the full scope of the deception. I logged into our joint credit card account and went back 6 months looking for patterns. I'd missed. There they were. Charges at restaurants I'd never been to, hotels I'd never heard of, stores that sold things we didn't own. All carefully timed for days when I was working late or out of town on construction projects. The financial betrayal was almost as stunning as the emotional one. She'd been using our money I'd earned swinging a hammer and managing crews to finance her affair. Romantic dinners, expensive lingerie, weekend getaways. I'd been unknowingly paying for my own humiliation. My phone rang. Mrs. Bowers from next door. "Eli, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling. I know Laya's away on business, but I wanted to check on you." Mrs. Bowers was 73 years old and had lived next door for 40 years. She knew every neighbor, every car, every routine on our street. More importantly, she cared about people and wasn't afraid to get involved when something seemed wrong. "That's very thoughtful, Mrs. Bowers. I'm doing fine." "I'm sure you are, dear. You've always been such a capable young man. It's just that I've noticed some changes lately, and I wanted you to know that if you need anything Anything at all, you just have to ask. What kind of changes? There was a pause. Well, I don't like to gossip, but I've seen Laya leaving at odd hours recently. Late at night, early in the morning, and last week there was a man in an expensive car who picked her up while you were at work. I thought perhaps it was work-related, but they seemed very familiar with each other more than just colleagues. Mrs. Bowers had seen Carter. She'd witnessed at least part of the affair, and she was offering to help in her own gentle way. I appreciate you looking out for us. I said, Eli, I've been married for 52 years, and I've seen a lot of marriages go through difficult times. If you need someone to talk to, or if you need any kind of help, please don't hesitate to ask. You're a good man, and you deserve better than... Well, you deserve to be treated with respect. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet house and realized something important. I wasn't alone in this. Viv had noticed Laya's changed behavior. Mick was ready to help however he could. Mrs. Bowers had been watching and was offering support. Even people I hadn't talked to yet, like Danny at the gas station, had noticed something was wrong. Laya thought she was being clever, keeping her affair secret while she decided what to do about our marriage. But in a small town, secrets were hard to keep, and she'd underestimated how many people were paying attention. My phone buzzed with another text. Heading to dinner at this amazing seafood place. Wish you were here to try the lobster. Tomorrow's the last day of sessions. Then I'll be home. Can't wait to see you. I looked at the timestamp. 6:30 p.m. According to Carter's social media posts from previous visits to Cape Cod, his favorite restaurant was Neptune's Table, an upscale seafood place that specialized in romantic dinners for two. I had an idea. I called the restaurant and asked to speak to the manager. Hi, this is Eli Barnes. My wife Laya is dining with you tonight, and I wanted to arrange a special surprise for her. Could you tell me what table she's at? I'd like to send over a bottle of champagne with a note. The hostess was happy to help. Oh yes, Miss Barnes. She's at table 12 with her companion. They just ordered appetizers. What a lovely surprise. Her companion, not her colleague, not her conference attendee. Her companion. Actually, I said, I've changed my mind about the champagne, but thank you for your help. I hung up and called Mick. You busy tonight? I asked. Not particularly. What do you need? How do you feel about a drive to Cape Cod? There was a pause. What exactly are we going to do in Cape Cod? We're going to gather some evidence and maybe have a conversation with my wife about her work conference. I'll pick you up in an hour. The drive to Cape Cod took 2.5 hours, giving me plenty of time to think about what I wanted to say and how I wanted to handle the situation. Mick drove while I navigated, both of us quiet for most of the trip. You sure about this? Mick asked as we crossed the bridge onto the Cape. I'm sure I want to see her face when she realizes she's been caught. And then what? Then I go home and file for divorce. We found Neptune's Table easily enough. It was exactly the kind of upscale waterfront restaurant that Carter would choose to impress someone. Valet parking, soft lighting, tables with ocean views. The kind of place I'd never taken Laya because I couldn't afford it, and she'd never asked me to because she knew it was beyond our budget. I could see them through the window before we even parked. Table 12, just like the hostess had said. Laya was wearing the expensive dress I'd found in her hidden overnight bag, her hair styled in a way I'd never seen before. Carter was leaning across the table, holding her hand, both of them laughing at something. They looked happy. Genuinely, radiantly happy in a way that Laya and I hadn't looked in years. That hurt more than I'd expected it to. There they are, I said, pointing them out to Mick. Yep, that's definitely not a business dinner. We sat in the parking lot for a few minutes, watching them through the window. They were completely absorbed in each other, oblivious to everything else around them. Laya touched Carter's face at one point, a gesture so intimate and familiar that it was clear this wasn't new for them. "What's the plan?" Mick asked. "I'm going to walk in there and introduce myself to Carter." "And you're going to record it with your phone for evidence?" Mick nodded. "I can do that. You want me to come in with you?" "No. Wait out here unless things go bad." I got out of the truck and walked toward the restaurant, my heart pounding but my mind clear. I'd rehearsed this moment during the drive, thinking through various scenarios and how I wanted to handle each one. The hostess greeted me with a professional smile. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "Actually, I'm here to surprise my wife. She's at table 12. Oh, how wonderful." "Right this way." I followed her through the dining room, weaving between tables of couples enjoying romantic dinners. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was about to destroy the most romantic evening of my wife's life. Leia saw me when I was still 10 ft away. The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. Carter was facing away from me, still talking, oblivious to the fact that his evening was about to take a dramatic turn. "Hi, honey," I said, stopping beside their table. "How's the conference going?" Leia's mouth opened and closed without making any sound. Carter turned around, confusion written across his face. "I'm sorry," he said. "I think there's been some mistake." "No mistake," I said pleasantly. "You must be Carter. I'm Eli Barnes, Leia's husband." The silence at their table was deafening around us. Other diners continued their conversations, unaware of the drama unfolding at table 12. Carter recovered first. "I think you should leave," he said, standing up. He was taller than I'd expected, well-dressed, confident in the way that money and success made some men confident. "I think you should sit down," I replied, not moving. "We're going to have a conversation." Leia finally found her voice. "Eli, what are you doing here? How did you find you?" "It wasn't hard. Your boss called Tuesday night asking why you missed the conference presentation." "Turns out there was no conference, Leia, just lies." She looked around the restaurant, clearly mortified that we were having this conversation in public. "Can we please talk about this somewhere private?" "Why are you embarrassed?" "Worried about what people might think." Carter put his hand on Leia's shoulder, a possessive gesture that made something dark and angry flare in my chest. "Look, I don't know what kind of problems you two have, but this isn't the place to work them out." "You're right," I said. "This is the place where my wife comes to spend our money on romantic dinners with her boyfriend while lying to me about work conferences. But you're absolutely right that it's not the place to work out our problems." I pulled out my phone and showed them both a screenshot of their text messages. Leia's face went white again. "Here's what's going to happen," I said quietly. "You're going to finish your expensive dinner that I apparently paid for, and then you're going to drive home tonight. And Carter, if I ever see you anywhere near my wife or my house again, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation." "You can't tell me what to do," Carter said. But his voice lacked conviction. "Actually, I can. See, I've got months of text messages, credit card records, and about half a dozen witnesses who've seen you two together. I've also got a very good divorce lawyer who's going to be very interested in all that evidence. So unless you want your name dragged through a very public and very messy divorce proceeding, you'll stay away from my wife." I turned to Leia. "As for you, we'll talk when you get home. And Leia, no more lies. I know everything." I walked out of the restaurant without looking back, my hands shaking but my head held high. Through the window I could see them sitting at their table in stunned silence, the romantic evening thoroughly destroyed. Mick was waiting by the truck with his phone in his hand. "Got it all," he said. "That was beautiful, man, absolutely beautiful. Let's go home." The drive back was quiet. Both of us lost in our own thoughts. I felt strangely calm, like a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had been lifted from my shoulders. The worst part was over. Now I knew exactly where I stood and I could start planning my next moves. "You think she'll actually come home tonight?" Mick asked as we pulled into my driveway. "Yeah, she'll come home. She's got a lot of explaining to do." Yayla's car pulled into our driveway at 3:17 a.m. I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and a folder full of printed evidence waiting for her. I had spent the hours since returning from Cape Cod, organizing everything I had discovered, creating a timeline of her lies and a comprehensive record of her betrayal. I heard her key in the lock, heard her pause in the hallway, probably steeling herself for the conversation she'd been dreading during the entire drive home. When she finally appeared in the kitchen doorway, she looked exhausted and defeated. "We need to talk," she said. "Yes, we do. Sit down." She sat across from me at the table where we'd eaten thousands of meals together, where we'd paid bills and planned vacations and discussed our future. Now it felt like a negotiation table. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Since Tuesday night when your boss called. But I've suspected something was wrong for months." Leah closed her eyes. "I never meant for it to happen this way." "How did you mean for it to happen? Were you planning to just disappear one day? Or maybe have Carter's baby and claim it was mine?" "It's not like that." "Then tell me what it's like. Explain to me how 8 years of marriage turned into elaborate lies and secret weekends with another man." She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I felt invisible, Eli, like I was disappearing a little more every day. You come home from work tired and dirty, we eat dinner in front of the TV, we go to bed, we get up and do it all again. That's not a life, that's just existing. So you decided to find excitement with Carter. I decided to remember what it felt like to be seen, to be appreciated, to be with someone who wanted to take me places and show me things and make me feel special." I opened the folder and spread some of the printed text messages across the table. "Is that what this is? Feeling special?" She looked at the messages, her own words describing our marriage as dead and me as a dead end, and flinched. "You printed my private messages. Your private messages that you sent using our shared phone plan and backed up to our shared computer. Messages where you and your boyfriend laugh about what a fool I am, how I'm holding you back, how you deserve better than the life we built together." I was angry when I wrote those things. "Which things? The part where you called me emotionally unavailable, or the part where you told him our sex life was non-existent, or maybe the part where you said you were done pretending to be happy?" Leah started crying, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her, no desire to make this easier. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. "I want a divorce." I said, "Eli, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can what? Pretend this never happened. Pretend you didn't spend months lying to my face while you planned a future with another man. Pretend you didn't use our money to finance your affair." I pulled out the credit card statements and showed her the highlighted charges. Romantic dinners, weekend getaways, expensive lingerie, all paid for with money I earned while you were at home planning your next lie. "I'll pay it back with what? You're about to be unemployed." She looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean Carter's married, Leah. Did you know that? His wife is a very successful attorney who's going to be very interested in the evidence I've collected. And I'm pretty sure his company has policies about employees who use their position to conduct affairs with vendors or clients." The color drained from her face again. "You wouldn't." "I absolutely would. In fact, I already sent copies of everything to his wife yesterday. I imagine she's having her own conversation with Carter right about now." Leah stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "You're not the man I married." "You're right. The man you married was naive enough to trust you. The man you married would have blamed himself for your unhappiness and tried to fix whatever was wrong with our marriage. But that man is gone. Hila, you killed him when you decided that lying and cheating was easier than having an honest conversation about what you needed. I stood up and gathered the papers back into the folder. You can stay here tonight, but I want you out by the weekend. Take whatever you want, but don't take anything that belongs to both of us. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know and I don't care. Maybe Carter will take you in, assuming his wife doesn't divorce him and take half his assets. Maybe Mandy will let you crash on her couch while you figure out your next move. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to blow up our marriage. I walked toward the stairs, then stopped and turned back. One more thing, Hila. Don't contact me unless it's through our lawyers. Don't call, don't text, don't show up at my work site. As far as I'm concerned, you're a stranger who used to live in my house. I went upstairs and locked the bedroom door, leaving her sitting alone at the kitchen table with the evidence of her betrayal spread out in front of her. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Leah moving around downstairs, presumably packing her things. I stayed in the bedroom until I heard her car leave, then went down to assess the damage. She'd taken her clothes, her personal items, and a few pieces of furniture that had belonged to her before we were married. She'd also taken the good coffee maker and the expensive blender we'd received as wedding gifts. But I didn't care about any of that. What mattered was that she was gone. My phone had 17 missed calls and 12 text messages. Most were from Leah, begging me to reconsider, promising to end things with Carter, swearing that she loved me and wanted to save our marriage. I deleted them all without reading them completely. There were also messages from Mick, Viv, and Mrs. Bowers, all checking to make sure I was okay. Word had apparently spread quickly that Leah had come home in the middle of the night and left again early in the morning. I called Mick first. "How you holding up?" he asked. "Better than I expected." "She's gone." "Good. You need anything?" "Actually, yeah. I need help changing the locks and maybe installing a security camera. I don't trust her not to come back when I'm at work. I'll be over in an hour." Next, I called my lawyer, Tom Mitchell. Tom had handled the legal work when we bought our house, and I trusted him to handle the divorce proceedings with the same thorough professionalism. "I need to file for divorce," I told him, "and I need to do it quickly." "Okay, grounds adultery, and I have extensive evidence." I spent an hour in Tom's office going through the evidence I'd collected and explaining the situation. Tom was impressed with the thoroughness of my documentation. "This is going to be a very straightforward case," he said. "With evidence this comprehensive, she's not going to have much room to negotiate." "Good. I want this over with as quickly as possible. What about property division? She can have whatever she brought into the marriage. Everything else stays with me, the house, the cars, the savings accounts, all of it." "That might not be realistic, Eli. Even with proof of adultery, she's still entitled to..." "She's entitled to nothing. She forfeited any claim to our shared assets when she decided to spend our money on her affair. Make that argument in court." Tom nodded. "I'll do my best." When I got home, Mick was already there with a new deadbolt and a wireless security camera system. We spent the afternoon securing the house and setting up the cameras to monitor the front door, back door, and driveway. "You really think she'll try to come back?" Mick asked as we tested the camera system. "I think she's desperate enough to try anything. She lost her marriage. Her boyfriend's probably about to lose his job and his own marriage, and she's got nowhere to go. Desperate people do stupid things." As if on cue, my phone rang. Yayla's name appeared on the screen. "Don't answer it," Mick advised. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message on speaker. Eli, please call me back. I know you're angry, but we need to talk about this like adults. I made mistakes, but so did you. You can't just throw away 8 years of marriage without even trying to work things out. I love you, and I know you still love me. Please just call me back. She still doesn't get it, Mick observed. She gets it. She's just hoping she can manipulate me into changing my mind. The phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Is this Eli Barnes? The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. Yes, this is Patricia Hale. I believe you know my husband, Carter. I felt a grim satisfaction. Carter's wife had received the evidence I'd sent her. Yes, I know Carter. I wanted to thank you for sending me those documents. They've been very illuminating. I'm sorry you had to find out that way. I'm not. I suspected something was going on, but I didn't have proof. Your evidence was exactly what I needed to make some important decisions about my future. What kind of decisions? I filed for divorce this morning. I also forwarded copies of everything to Carter's employer and to several of his clients. I thought they should know what kind of man they're doing business with. I smiled for the first time in days. How did Carter take the news? Not well. He's been calling and texting all morning, begging me to reconsider. Sound familiar? Very familiar. He also mentioned that your wife has been trying to contact him, but he's not responding. Apparently, he's decided that she's not worth losing everything over. So Carter had abandoned Laya as soon as the situation became inconvenient for him. I wasn't surprised. Men like Carter were opportunists who disappeared the moment things got complicated. I hope everything works out for you, Patricia. It will. And Eli, you did the right thing. Both of us deserve to know the truth. After I hung up, Mick looked at me with something like admiration. You played this perfectly, man. Carter's lost his wife, probably his job and his girlfriend all in one day. It's not about revenge, Mick. It's about consequences. They made choices, and now they get to live with the results. But even as I said it, I knew there was more to it than that. There was definitely an element of satisfaction in knowing that Carter's life was falling apart just as dramatically as mine had. He'd thought he could steal another man's wife without paying a price, and he'd been wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Mandy. Laya is staying with me for a few days. She's devastated and wants to work things out. Can you please just talk to her? I showed the message to Mick. You going to respond? Yeah, I typed back. Tell Wheela that if she wants to communicate with me, she can do it through our lawyers. Any other contact will be considered harassment. Mandy responded immediately. You're being cruel and unreasonable. She made a mistake, but she loves you. I typed back. She made hundreds of mistakes over several months. That's not a mistake, that's a choice. And the choice she made was Carter over me. Now she gets to live with that decision. I blocked Mandy's number and added it to the list of contacts I'd blocked since discovering the affair. Laya, Carter, Sloan, and now Mandy. I was systematically cutting out everyone who had enabled or participated in the betrayal of my marriage. What's next? Mick asked. Next, I wait for the divorce to be finalized and I start rebuilding my life. Any regrets? I thought about that question seriously. Did I regret losing my marriage? Did I regret the years I'd invested in a relationship that had ended in betrayal? Did I regret the way I'd handled the situation? No, I said finally. No regrets at all. 2 weeks later, I was having coffee at Viv's pet shop when she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. Saw Laya yesterday, she said casually. She was at the bank with some man I didn't recognize. They seemed to be discussing paperwork. What kind of paperwork? Couldn't tell for sure, but it looked official. Legal documents, maybe. I thanked Viv and immediately called Tom Mitchell. Tom, I need you to check on something. I think Laya might be trying to access our joint accounts or maybe challenge the divorce filing. I'll look into it and call you back." He called back an hour later with news that made me furious. She hired a lawyer, Eli Marcus Webb, one of those aggressive divorce attorneys who specialize in maximizing settlements for cheating spouses. He's filed a counterpetition claiming that the marriage broke down due to your emotional neglect and that she's entitled to half of everything, including the house. Based on what evidence? He's claiming that your long work hours and lack of emotional availability drove her to seek companionship elsewhere. He's also arguing that her affair was a symptom of the marriage's problems, not the cause. I felt that familiar cold rage settling in my stomach. Even after being caught in an elaborate web of lies, even after losing her boyfriend and her reputation, Laya was still trying to rewrite history and make herself the victim. What are our options? We fight it. With the evidence you collected, we can demonstrate that her affair was premeditated and ongoing. Not a reaction to marital problems, but it's going to get ugly and it's going to be expensive. I don't care about the cost. I want to destroy this argument completely. That evening, I was sitting in my basement workshop planning my next moves when I heard a car pull into my driveway. The security camera alert popped up on my phone showing Laya getting out of an unfamiliar sedan. She was accompanied by a man in an expensive suit who I assumed was Marcus Webb. I watched through the camera as they approached my front door. Instead of knocking, Laya used her old key. Apparently, she'd made a copy before returning the original. The new deadbolt stopped her and I heard her rattling the door handle in frustration. Then she started pounding on the door. "Eli, I know you're in there. We need to talk." I stayed in the basement watching the security feed on my phone. After a few minutes of pounding and shouting, Webb apparently convinced her to stop. They stood on my porch for several minutes, Webb taking photos of the house and making notes on a legal pad. Then they walked around to the backyard where Webb took more photos and measurements. They were building a case for Laya's claim to half the house, documenting improvements and calculating values. I called Mick. "They're here," I said. "Laya and her lawyer. They're taking photos and measurements. Want me to come over?" "No. I want them to finish whatever they're doing. But I need you to do me a favor. Name it. Remember that storage unit where you keep your motorcycle? I need to store some things there for a few days." "Sure. What kind of things?" "Important documents, computer files, things I don't want them to find if they get a court order to search the house." The truth was, I had a plan that was going to require careful timing and absolute secrecy. If Laya wanted to play dirty, I was going to show her what dirty really looked like. Over the next few days, I quietly moved copies of all my evidence to Mick's storage unit, along with some additional documentation I've been collecting. Credit card records showing every penny she'd spent on her affair. Phone records documenting the extent of her lies. Screenshots of social media posts where she and her friends had mocked our marriage. But I also had something else. Something I discovered while going through our home computer more thoroughly. Laya had been planning to leave me for months, possibly longer. Hidden in a folder labeled work projects were draft letters to divorce attorneys, research on property division laws, and calculations of what she thought she could get in a settlement. She'd also been secretly photographing valuable items in our house and researching their worth. Most damning of all, she'd been corresponding with Carter about their future together long before their affair became physical. They discussed him leaving his wife, her leaving me, and the two of them starting a new life together with the money they'd get from their respective divorces. The affair wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. It was part of a calculated plan to destroy two marriages and use the financial settlements to fund a new life together. I printed everything and added it to my evidence file. Then I made a decision that would end this war once and for all. I called Patricia Hale. Patricia, it's Eli Barnes. I have some additional information that I think you'll find interesting. What kind of information? Proof that Carter and Leah were planning to leave both of us from the very beginning. This wasn't an affair that got out of hand. It was a conspiracy to destroy our marriages for financial gain. I met Patricia at a coffee shop and showed her everything I'd found. Her reaction was even stronger than I'd hoped. "These bastards," she said, reading through Leah's calculations of what she expected to get from our house. "They actually thought they could manipulate both of us into paying for their new life together. What are you going to do with this information?" "I'm going to make sure Carter doesn't get a penny from our divorce. And I'm going to make sure every person in his professional network knows exactly what kind of man he is." Patricia was true to her word. Within a week, Carter's professional reputation was in ruins. His employer fired him for violating company ethics policies. Several of his clients terminated their contracts. His own divorce proceedings turned into a financial bloodbath that left him with almost nothing. And then Patricia did something I hadn't expected. She called Marcus Webb, Leah's attorney, and offered to testify in my divorce case about the conspiracy she and Carter had uncovered. The effect was immediate and devastating. When Webb realized that Patricia had evidence of premeditation and conspiracy, he advised Leah to accept whatever settlement I was willing to offer. The alternative was a public trial that would destroy what was left of her reputation and likely result in her getting nothing at all. Leah called me directly, violating the no-contact order, crying and begging me to reconsider. "Eli, please. I never meant for it to go this far. I made mistakes, but I don't deserve to lose everything." "You're right." I said, "You don't deserve to lose everything. You deserve to lose more than everything. You deserve to experience exactly the same betrayal and humiliation you put me through. I'll do anything to make this right. There's nothing you can do. It's over." Leah signed the papers and disappeared. She signed the divorce papers the next day. I kept the house, the cars, the savings accounts, and everything else we built together. She got her personal belongings and a small settlement that barely covered her legal fees. Carter, meanwhile, had lost his job, his house, most of his assets, and his reputation. The last I heard, he was working as a sales associate at a car dealership, living in a studio apartment, and still dealing with the fallout from his destroyed professional network. Epilogue. The New Beginning. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I was having a beer at the Rusty Anchor when Mitt brought me some interesting news. "Guess who I saw at the grocery store yesterday," he said. "I have no idea. Leah. She's working as a cashier at the supermarket in the next town over. Looked like she'd aged about 10 years. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, no regret. She was just a person I used to know who had made some very bad decisions. "Good for her," I said. "At least she's working." "You really don't care what happens to her anymore, do you?" "No, I don't." And that was the truth. The woman who had betrayed our marriage lied to my face for months and tried to steal half of everything I'd worked for was no longer my problem. She was free to live whatever life she could build from the wreckage of her choices. As for me, I was doing better than I'd ever imagined possible. The house was mine, decorated exactly the way I wanted it. My construction business was thriving. Word had gotten around about how I'd handled the divorce, and it had actually enhanced my reputation for being tough and reliable. I'd even started dating someone new. Sarah, a teacher at the local elementary school who was divorced herself and understood the importance of honesty and trust in a relationship. We took things slow, built our connection on friendship and mutual respect, and never made promises we couldn't keep. But the best part was the peace. No more wondering where my wife really was when she claimed to be working late. No more analyzing every conversation for hidden meanings. No more walking on eggshells around someone who had already decided I wasn't good enough for the life she wanted. I'd learned something important during those dark months of discovery and divorce. I'd rather be alone than be with someone who didn't value what we had together. I'd rather start over at 40 than spend the next 20 years with someone who saw our marriage as a prison instead of a partnership. Mrs. Bauer still brought me cookies every few weeks, and we'd sit on her porch talking about the neighborhood and sharing gossip. Viv still kept me informed about everything happening in town, though she was tactful enough never to mention Laya unless I asked. And Mick remained my closest friend, the one person who'd stood by me when everything fell apart and helped me put my life back together. One evening, as we were closing down the anchor after a particularly good night, Mick asked me a question I'd been expecting for months. "Any regrets about how you handled everything?" I thought about it seriously, the way I always did when he asked important questions. "No," I said finally. "I regret that I wasted 8 years on someone who didn't deserve them. I regret that I was naive enough to trust someone who is lying to my face every day. But I don't regret how I handled it once I found out the truth. Even the revenge part, especially the revenge part. Laya and Carter thought they could destroy 2 marriages, steal our money, and ride off into the sunset together. They thought we were just obstacles to be overcome, not people with feelings and rights and the ability to fight back." I finished my beer and stood up to leave. They learned different. As I walked home through the quiet streets of our small town, past the houses where people were settling in for the night with their families, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete satisfaction with my life and my choices. Laya had been right about one thing. I wasn't the same man she'd married. That man had been trusting, forgiving, willing to overlook problems in the hope that love would be enough to fix them. The man I'd become was harder, more careful, less willing to give second chances to people who'd proven they didn't deserve them. But he was also stronger, more self-reliant, and absolutely unwilling to settle for less than he deserved. Some people might call what I did to Laya and Carter revenge. I preferred to think of it as justice. They'd made choices, and I'd simply made sure they experienced the full consequences of those choices. The stay had been extended all right, extended far beyond what either of them had planned for, and with results they never could have imagined. And I was perfectly fine with that. 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 Fine with